So again, if anyone's looking for additional information on the scorecards, we would invite and urge you to actually go to the websites of the Farm Bureau on Shackle Upstate and NFIB, and that'll supply more information, more detail for you to help make that informed decision that we're talking about. All right, so let's get a little bit more specific now. We've been talking in general terms about mandate relief and some of these other areas. I want to talk specifically about minimum wage, Wage Theft Prevention Act, and something else that I'll figure out once we get there. But let's start with minimum wage. And I know it's been on your report cards. There's a lot of discussion about proponents say it's overdue, it's about fairness. There's really a need to make sure people can earn enough money to sustain themselves. Obviously, there's some concerns on the other side of the aisle too. Tell us what you think the real issue is on the minimum wage front, and give us a prediction what you think might happen.
Well, I guess I'll start since Mike's chuckling. I'll give you two numbers. First one is 49. Does anybody know what 49 is? 49th is the business tax climate in New York State according to the Tax Foundation. So keep in mind, 49. Next number is 17. 17% is what they're proposing to raise minimum wage. So when you're in the 49th worst business tax climate in the country and you're going to add an additional 17% on the labor side, what's that going to do to our competitiveness, not only in a state economy and a regional economy, but in a global economy? It's going to make our businesses less competitive. So there's that concern. The last time we raised minimum wage in the state of New York, we lost about 20% of our jobs for our youth. They are going to be impacted. They are not going to have opportunities. So you have to take that into consideration. This is not about whether or not people deserve more money. I don't think anybody of us, I wouldn't personally argue that people don't deserve an increase in pay. But we can't do it in the climate that we have right now. When New York State takes care of fixing those cost drivers that add cost to you, workers' comp, unemployment insurance, general taxation, all right, when they can fix those, then we can have an honest conversation about raising the minimum wage. But until then, it's just not something that we can be supportive of.
This goes back to my whole vacuum analogy. You know, well, minimum wage, it's well intended, it sounds good, but in light, as Brian just described, of everything else, if you're going to mandate and put pressure on the wage structure and you're going to tell a small business that they have to pay, and by the way, and I've said this many, many times, minimum wage is a big issue for NFIB, but a lot of my members, if not probably 80+%, don't pay minimum wage. That's not the point. The point is the state's telling you, in fact, you know, I made an analogy, the state, in light of the financial situation, negotiated 2 fiscally responsible contracts with PEF and CSEA and then some other groups because they didn't have the money to be overly generous. But the state wants to tell business owners that they have to pay a certain rate or put that pressure on the wage structure of a business in this economy. Seems oxymoronic to me. So look, you didn't give a prediction either, so here's what I'm going to say, I think. Minimum wage percolated again today. It had been pretty quiet, but it's a campaign issue. We saw it when it got introduced that it's a campaign issue. There's a certain side that likes to run on this and drive it home. I think it feeds the whole class warfare dialogue that's gone on here in New York. But from Election Day to January 1st is sort of no man's land. It's like a dead zone, and the legislature does tend to come back at that time and take care of some things. My fear, and I think the fear of both of them, is that when they come back and maybe they give themselves a raise, or maybe they do some other things that they can't give themselves a raise if they don't give a whole bunch of teenagers raises too, and then that's when minimum wage is going to get down. And that's my fear. So it's not really a prediction, but if it's going to happen, I think that's when it's going to happen.
And our point has always been, if you want to raise the minimum wage, let's have a discussion at the national level, because we compete against Pennsylvania and Ohio and Michigan, especially in the farm states. And to artificially inflate it in one state puts us at a competitive disadvantage. And so let's make this a national discussion. And again, for skilled labor, we pay well over minimum wage. But as Brian mentioned, It's the young kids, the people, especially in rural communities where farms are located. They're the main employer for high school kids when it comes to strawberry picking or working at the farm stand or apple picking, things like that. And so minimum wage, they get paid the minimum wage, and it's their first entry into the workforce. And farms really do a great job preparing the younger Americans for work in their later lives through these jobs. And those are the first jobs that will be cut back. And we'll lose that pipeline of kids who have learned how to work. And so that was a big issue for us.
There's two other issues on this topic, and then we'll go to wage theft, right? So two is there's a wage suppression component to this as well. So if you bump minimum wage from $7.25 to $8.50 an hour, there's gonna be a whole lot of people that are in that $8.59, $9.50, $10, $11 an hour, right? That are suddenly gonna look at it and go, "Where's my raise?" Right? You just raised all those. Now you need to raise mine. I was well above minimum wage. Now I'm real close to minimum wage. I'm not happy there. So there's a wage suppression that also comes into this. The other thing to keep in mind is when Speaker Silver introduced this back in January, he said we needed to do what was right for families that were trying to raise themselves on minimum wage. Okay, two things. One, that's about 10% of the population. All right, so about 10% of the population, the main wage earner in the family is making minimum wage. If you really want to help that 10% and not penalize is the wrong word, but not penalize the other 90%, you raise the earned income tax credit. The EITC is there to help those families that are low wage trying to raise kids. That's what you should do. Bump the EITC, get that money directly to the people you want to benefit. Don't do it by raising minimum wage, which just eliminates a whole lot of other jobs, as Jeff talked about, and raises the cost to our business.
Perfect.
Okay. So since I'm the moderator, I can change the questions. Since Mike was the only one that did try to answer my question about what's going to happen on minimum wage, I'm not going to let you off the hook on that. So let's talk a little bit about what's going to happen after Election Day. Will the legislature reconvene? What are the issues that they're going to address, and what are we going to see happen? This is the prediction time. So, and Jeff, let's start with Jeff.
Yay!
Great. Certainly.
So, Jeff.
Yes. Certainly, minimum wage is on the table. Pay raise for legislators is on the table, although with the bad press that they've gotten over the last month or two, I don't know if there was ever an appetite from the public to allow them to do that. I don't know if it's still there. But other than that, there's a whole host of issues that are coming down the pike. I mean, we're looking at a lot of energy issues, for example. The governor wants to close Indian Point. We have to find 2,000 megawatts of power to fill that void. There's transmission issues that need to be addressed, repowering of coal plants. I mean, just on the energy side, it's considerable. I think there might be legislative attempts to try to prevent the Thruway Authority from increasing tolls by 45%, which we would applaud.
Modestly.
A modest increase of 45%.
Right.
Yes. But I do think minimum wage really is the big issue. They already passed the casino gambling amendment vote this year, so that'll have to wait till next year. But minimum wage is a big deal.
Yeah, we know they have to come back because there's some rent laws for New York City that they have to address before the end of the year. So we know they're going to come back at some point. I think all the issues that Jeff talked about are definitely on the table. And, you know, there's a whole host of other things. Mike and I sit on the chairman's committee. We were appointed by the governor to sit on the committee that's tasked with looking at the regulatory environment. We've been having some discussions of late with the governor's staff about workers' comp, unemployment insurance, the scaffold law, construction costs. There's a whole bunch of things we've been working on. So they could all come up as, you know, what's often referred to as the big ugly. Not Mike, but the big ugly.
Couldn't have predicted that.
You know, but it's this bill like we saw last December in the tax code overhaul, right? So you put a whole bunch of things together in a bill that moderately offend most of us, but then give us something else in exchange that we can't really complain about. So you're either thumbs up or thumbs down, and you run the risk either way on how you choose to support that. So it'll be some form of a big ugly bill that will give a little bit for everybody, will take a little bit from everybody, and that'll be up to the rank and file members, many of whom have either announced they're retiring or will have lost their reelection, that they're basically rubber stamping it and hitting the road. So that legislative pay raise, though, I think is going to be a real controversial one.
I still don't think he gave us a prediction on minimum wage.
He didn't.
Oh, I agreed with Jeff.
He wanted
Listen, here's what I can tell you. In a conversation with the governor's staff, we were basically told minimum wage, an increase in minimum wage is coming.
You can't stay at $7.25 for perpetuity. I
Right.
believe was the quote.
So
Which
we
is
know
true.
it's coming. It's what happens in the interim to offset that impact.
Correct.
Okay, so let's, and at this time, actually, we're going to be transitioning with another minute or two to the question and answer portion from the audience. So if you have a question that you would like us to ask the panel, like me to ask the panel, please fill out that index card. If you want an index card, raise your hand. Ellen has them in the back there. And then I'll ask staff to please bring them down here, and we'll pick and choose and fire away. While we're doing that, let's talk about wage theft prevention. The Rochester Business Alliance, we have 2,000 members. There are a number of issues that are on our agenda every year that we hear a lot from members. The rising health insurance cost is number one. Taxes is right up there. Obviously, mandates. Workers' comp is another area where we hear quite a bit. The one regulation, the one law that we've heard the most about the past year and a half, the thing that's really kind of getting under people's skin, is the Wage Theft Prevention Act. So there was an effort this past year to repeal one of the more egregious pieces of that legislation. It failed. I noticed that I think it's on at least 2 of your report cards, and Jeff, I'm not sure if it was on yours or not. Can you, Brian and Mike, elaborate a little bit more on Wage Theft Prevention Act? Are we going to get something done on that? Can employers expect to see some relief on that in the coming session?
Well, I always view that there are 3 ways that you can fix New York and make it open for business. One is obviously statutory, and then you have the whole public perception is another component, and then you have the regulatory, the stuff that the chief executive could do by himself if he so choose. The Wage Theft Prevention Act is looking to address a problem of reality of the underground economy that it's a New York City central issue, that somebody took that problem, blew it out of proportion, and now you have that annual notice that you have to give in the primary language of your employee, and keep it for 7 years, and go over their pay and their benefits. And I'll see people are already shaking their head because it makes everybody angry. This falls into not only the statutory fix that needs to be made, but it falls into that whole New York is anti-business. Because what it basically is saying is every employer in the state of New York is a criminal. Now everybody's nodding their head yes. And that's the problem, is that you have a small problem and you blow it up, and then they put this law in place that impacts everybody. So we've seen bills that look to repeal it completely. There's one that reform, it would take away about 16 words out of the bill that would take the annual part of it done. I mean, usually, I don't know, I never took a job even if I was 12, that I didn't know how much I was getting paid and what my benefits are. So you do it once and then be done with it. I think that even the sponsor of the bill has acknowledged that this has been kind of blown out of proportion. So I would think that somewhere along the lines in the next 12 to 16 months that one would be something that would get reformed at least.
Right. It's sort of the quintessential example of government overstepping and putting its foot where it didn't need to be. All of you as employers or as employees get a paycheck. You might get it once a week, twice a month, every other week, right? However it is, you get a paycheck. I'm fairly certain on that paycheck it does tell you what you get paid, does it not? Okay, so we have this issue now, as Mike calls it, the underground economy down in New York City, that there were concerns whether they're doing it, so they create this law. We supported a bill that Mike talked about, I think it's Senator DeFrancisco and Assemblyman Gaberzak, one from Syracuse, one from Buffalo, respectively, to take out 16 words, which would eliminate the annual notice. So what it basically would say is you have to notify your employee one time in their employment career how much they actually get paid, and that's it, and you'd be fine. That bill passed the Senate. It stalled in the Assembly. As Mike and I understand it, in some conversations we've had with some different labor organizations, I think they're in agreement with us now that it's an overstep, so I would expect that once that bill gets reintroduced this next session, and it'll have to get reintroduced because the session ends December 31st, so all legislation has to get reintroduced. My assumption is once that gets introduced, it will then get passed by both houses and signed by the governor if it isn't included in the big ugly at the end of the year.
All right. So I did think of that third item, and we talked about a little bit earlier in terms of mandates, and a number of you were active on this front this week, and that has to do with the thruway and the 45% modest increase in the thruway toll. So talk a little bit about what sort of impact that'll have on New York if it goes through. Will it go through? And why should we be concerned about it? And what can we do about it? Jeff?
Yes, I'll start. We spent, 45% increase proposed on top of the increases that we saw 2 years ago aren't modest, no matter what anyone says in Albany. And they don't, we get these increases because no one, they don't, I'm going to rephrase this politely, they don't address the structural deficits of the Thruway Authority. There's a lot of other things that have been recommended, frankly, to the Thruway Authority to try to help close the deficits, or cut away the Canal Corporation, for example, because they're really the drag on the Thruway Authority. And there's some other ideas. But this is just going to keep happening again and again and again until they address the actual problem. We're putting Band-Aids on it. And right now, the Band-Aids are causing businesses money. For example, we ship a lot of milk to New York City, as I mentioned earlier, because that's where all the people are. There are shipping companies, milk haulers, that are going to have an increased cost of about $150,000 to $200,000 a year because they use a thruway so much. There is a flower grower who has to sell 6,000 more pots of geraniums in order just to make up that 45% increase on his shipments. So we talk about, as I mentioned earlier, farms or any business owner needs to figure out what they do on the farm or in the business to try to make ends meet, yet it can be completely blown up by one decision in Albany, which is a cowardly decision. It's not making the right, real, true answer, or finding the true answer to solving the problem. They're just putting a Band-Aid on it, and it impacts a lot of people. So I would submit the $200,000 increase to any business, no matter if it's IBM or a dairy farm, is noticed at the highest levels, and it certainly has. Whether we can do anything about it is really up to our members, your members, you all, because right now all we have is political leverage, and grassroots does that, and it's reaching out to elected officials, to the governor, to the Thruway Authority to tell them how displeased you are by this, reaching out to newspapers to get in the press, because right now this is on a train going into the station to be finalized, and the only way we can do it is to make it so politically unpopular that they won't do it.
Mike, October 1st, the hike could have gone into effect. Mm-hmm. It hasn't. Mm-mm. Is some of the pressure working?
Yeah, but that's if you're going to be really openly optimistic. I think that the best part about being an advocate is when the people that you need to advocate give you ammunition. So like the governor's open for business or the thruway calling it modest. I mean, those two things, put them together, and we've had a field day for the last 3 months saying you can't be open for business if you're going to modestly, which I've called insensitive. I've called it asinine, really. I mean, so if I said it publicly, if I did it publicly, I could do it here. Because it is, because think about it. If you are so out of touch with reality that you would call it modest from the get-go, from the beginning, then that is exactly why New York has an anti-business reputation. I mean, it goes back to those 3 things I said that you need to do. I think that those of us individually, collaboratively, have been able to tie this, the whole open for business, and if you're going to say that Albany has undergone a transformative process and is functioning and it's a new Albany and a new New York and all the buzzwords that have been used, at the end of the day, you're still taking a self-inflicted financial crisis and asking taxpayers, toll payers, business owners to pay the bill. No, go ahead. You'll yell at me for talking too long.
Brian, you have 30 seconds.
So Virgil Conway, who's the treasurer of the Thruway Authority, at their board meeting where they approved the modest 45% toll increase, when somebody brought up the fact that trucks will now avoid the Thruway, he had 2 comments, and I'm paraphrasing here. One, that would just show the greediness of truckers.
And you can see that on YouTube, by
and
the
you
way.
can see it. You just go take a look. Second, he said, well, that's okay. Alternate roads, 5 and 20, Route 9, Route 104, they can take that extra traffic because there's been no traffic on it because everyone's been on the Thruway. Genius, right? Here's what you have to understand. 90% of what you consume comes to you via a truck. Fruits, vegetables, gasoline, clothing. Everything you consume comes to you to a truck. If you don't think that a modest 45% toll increase isn't going to come out of your pocketbook somewhere, well, congratulations, because you're living in a world where I wish I was sometimes, right? But here's the other thing to keep in mind is you're going to hear a lot about infrastructure. You're going to hear a lot about roads and bridges and new construction. You're going to hear a lot about the Tappan Zee Bridge. How is that stuff going to get to where it needs to be? It's going to come there via truck. All of our construction costs are going to go up. Or you're going to see this ancillary push, and everything's going to go up. It's just, and as Jeff said, it's the structural issues in the Thruway Authority who have no responsibility to you as voters, that you're a blank check. And they're going to take as much money as yours as they can until somebody holds them responsible. My prediction will be they're going to come out and say, okay, it's not 45%, it's
16.
Yeah, take your pick, whatever that is. And everyone's going to go, yay, and let's pat ourselves in the back. No, when it comes out, hopefully the first comment you'll see will be from me, which says, that's great, but you didn't do anything to fix the structural issue, so we'll see you again in 2 years when we're going to bring this issue up again and battle
the reason
it.
I say 16 is people who have done the math say that if you take a 3-axle truck, which is what this 45% is on, and you say not going to be 45, it's going to be 16. And then if they put a 16% toll hike on passenger vehicles,
It's the same revenue.
Right. And the kicker is that 4 years ago, under Governor Spitzer and then Patterson, is we went through a year-long regulatory fight unsuccessfully because they wanted to restrict trucks on local roads going across the state and put them back on the Thruway. And so now we're getting the toll increase, and they're trying to send them back.
Right. Ironic, isn't it?
see, asinine works.
Okay, gentlemen, let's transition to some questions from the audience now. And actually, there were 3 questions on this topic. This is going to be more economic development related, and really, it speaks to hydrofracking, and in terms of its importance to the state. And Jeff, there's one question in particular from an audience member asking, what is it that, what's your perspective on how it's going to impact the farming community? Maybe you can start off.
It has good and bad impacts on the farming community. Farmers in the southern tier stand to make a lot of money from natural gas drilling. They already do vertically when they drill vertically in Steuben County, in Chemung County. There are farmers who will make money through the process and then will automatically turn it around and then reinvest in their farms. That is the #1 story that we try to tell, is that the farms don't just take the money and go to Aruba and retire. They buy more cows so we can make more milk, so we can have more yogurt in the state. They can buy a new tractor, $100,000 tractor from the dealer next door who hasn't sold one in a while, and keep that dealership in the area. They can buy more land, buy more feed, buy more seed, and that keeps the infrastructure of agriculture going in the state. And we've seen it start to wane over the last decade or two. That is a very important piece of the issue that we try to promote. Other piece that we try to promote is it could have a very negative impact on our very land, on our resources that we need for production: water, land. And we need clean water, we need clean land in order to make our living. So we need to mitigate that risk. And so we can get the benefits while mitigating the risk, so we don't get the drawbacks. And we have every expectation the DEC is doing exactly that through their SGIS process. It's been 4 years that we've gone through scoping and regulatory statements. I've gone through the draft SGIS, and now we're going through the health impact survey. Rightly so, they should do that, because we want to make sure we make all the right decisions. Because there's a lot of people out there who knee-jerk know there's going to be problems. Just think what will happen if. We're going to take that if out of the equation. That's DEC's mission, and we think that they can do it.
Yeah, and you know, we support the safe development of the Marcellus Shale. We think New York, as Jeff said, will do it the right way. We'll do it in an environmentally friendly way. I'll leave you with a couple of statistics. One is 95%. New York State imports 95% of the natural gas that we burn. 95%, yet we sit on the second largest natural gas reserve in the world. We have to figure out a way to be able to tap into that. It will lower our energy costs. It will help our farms. It will help our manufacturing community. It's something we desperately need to do. The second thing is, take a look at North Dakota. All right, North Dakota is currently looking at about 1% unemployment. 1%. Effectively, they have no unemployment in the state of North Dakota. A good portion of that is due to North Dakota's development of shale gas. People have jobs. People are investing in their communities. They're buying products. The hotels are full. The restaurants are full. They have money now to rebuild their roads and bridges. This is an economic opportunity that New York State cannot and should not walk away from. And we believe that the governor understands that. We think that he will ultimately, through the DEC, we will do hydraulic fracturing in New York State, and we'll do it in a safe, environmentally friendly way.
Just one more point is that if and when we get to the end of this process and we do have drilling in the state, it will be the safest in the nation. It will be the most expensive process to go through in the nation. And I think the decision now will be how expensive and how many regulatory hoops we want the gas companies to go through in order to drill in the state. And there's a tipping point, because if you make it too expensive, they're not going to do it, because we don't have as high quality gas in New York as they do in Ohio and Pennsylvania. And there's much more welcoming environment there. And they've had problems. And I definitely want to make sure we don't have the same problems in New York. But there is going to be a tipping point regulatorily as far as whether the companies will actually even want to locate here.
All right, let's see if this question draws out bombastic Mike. And this is another audience question. Can Andrew Cuomo become the next Scott Walker?
No.
Would you please elaborate?
Andrew Cuomo is not Scott Walker. And I mean, look, the governor. Oh man.
The two other panelists are glad that this is resting with Mike right now.
No, look, the governor inherited a fiscal mess. The economy's been in a recession. He negotiated some more fair, I guess, if that's correct, contracts with PEF and CSEA. He did put the tax cap in place, but opened up a whole door to mandate relief. I've been a little concerned, but I'm not sure where I'm at with the whole Uber Financial Control Board you've started to see as municipalities approach the fiscal cliff. You then have statements the governor's made that they will look at the fiscal situation in municipalities on a case-by-case basis, which to me, again, becomes concern that you're not going to talk about global mandate relief, and we've already described mandate relief, and a lot of it has to do with taxpayer-dependent organizations or public employee unions. So, no, he's not going to be Scott Walker because there hasn't been, you haven't seen a determined drive to deal with these issues head on. There's a lot of nibbling at the edges and kind of dancing around, and the focus hasn't been there. That was pretty good.
That's very good. That's why he's a lobbyist. Here's the thing.
Advocate.
Okay. You go with that. Whatever helps you sleep
You
at
make the
night.
call.
Andrew Cuomo cannot become Scott Walker because the New York State Assembly will not allow it. I mean, the reality is we have three players in how our legislation gets done. It's the governor, it's the Senate, and it's the Assembly. Jeff talked earlier about there's 150 assembly districts. You don't get to number 100 until you get north of really the Tappan Zee Bridge. Right, so that means the bulk of the people from the Tappan Zee south out through Long Island, for the most part, are members of the Assembly Democratic Caucus. They will not allow a Scott Walker type of move to be done in New York State. That's why we did Let New York Work, as I said earlier. It's not repeal, 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 which dead on arrival as soon as we put it on paper. It's fair, it's modest, it's a compromised position, but it will get the job done for us.
Jeff, I won't make you answer that one, but I'll ask you to maybe lead off this next question. What are one or two issues that you feel distract from your key priorities and take up unnecessary time? So what are some of the biggest distractions and as you try to achieve your agenda?
Grope gate.
Yeah, I mean, there's anything, well, everything is pretty much the answer. There is a lack of focus in the Capitol on the important issues. I mentioned this early on, that we spend so much time trying to get people to concentrate on our issues. And for example, you go to an office for a meeting and there's four other groups backed up, waiting to get in the meeting. If you're lucky, you get 5 minutes with the legislator, and to try to get them to concentrate on agriculture for 5 minutes. If they do that 5 minutes a day, I would be so happy. It's everything else. It's healthcare. It's human services issues. I mean, they're all noble, right issues to be concentrated on. I don't mind them focusing on that. What I do mind is all the extracurricular activities. The Vito Lopez issues, the Grope Gate kind of stuff, because legislators are paid to do a very serious job, and a lot of them do it very seriously. But it's the other ones that don't that really give a disservice to New York State.
So what is the hardest part of doing your job right now, Brian Sampson?
The hardest part, trying to keep getting along with Mike and Jeff. No, here's the hardest part is there's a couple of them. One, I still think the business community and taxpayers need to be better advocates for themselves. We still haven't embraced the fact that as taxpayers, we are the largest special interest group in the state of New York. Without us paying our taxes, the only money that the state collects is federal taxes, or money from the federal government, which is our federal taxes. So we're the largest special interest group. We need to remember that, and we need to reinforce and use our power in the voting booth to do that. So there's that. The other part of it is, too, you'll hear a lot about special interest, right? We're a special interest. There are other special interest groups out there. On the public employee side, and again, this is nothing against public employees, but there's a perverse cycle that happens here in New York, right? So we as taxpayers, we pay our taxes. Those taxes go to hire people in school districts and municipal governments, right? They are part of either NYSED, PEF, CSEA, correctional officers, whatever, the PBAs. They become a part of that union that's required of them. Part of their wage then is paid to the union in union dues. The union dues then go to fund campaigns, which effectively go to take more of your money, right? So here we are, we're paying our taxes, and our taxes that we pay are somehow coming back to us and trying to take more of our money, right? So we have to figure out how to neutralize some of the impact that the special interest groups, as Mike and I like to call them, the taxpayer-dependent groups, have on our elected officials. We think the way to do that is through all of you as voters to make sure you're doing what's right, you're educating, and you're casting votes accordingly.
All right, final question. And then I'll ask each of our panelists to give us some closing remarks. Why should people believe that New York is on a better path? What is there to be optimistic? And there are things to be optimistic about. We've talked about some of these things tonight, how we're seeing the legislature operating a little bit more functionally. We've seen balanced budgets. We're seeing some reforms that we've not seen in the past. So did I just answer the question?
You did a good job. So you want us to close now? Mike's got a very colorful analogy he'll share with you in a moment. But here, all the things that Chris talked about are very good, right? They're all, yes, because you want, yes, you do. So those are all very good. I think a couple other things that are very good. We have a governor that is being responsible, something that we haven't had, I would dare say, in the last decade. Republican and Democrat both. And you can think back to who's been our governor over the last decade, right? So we have one that is responsible, who understands that New York can't continue down this path. That's positive. We have a New York State Senate right now that is functioning again, where it didn't function in 2009, 2010. That's a positive. We have a number of upstate Assembly Democrats that are now, being more responsible, with our tax dollars. They understand that their communities that they represent are struggling a little bit more than some of their colleagues from downstate, so they're being a little bit more aggressive, pushing legislation that's good for us here in upstate New York. Those are some very positive things. We need to make sure, though, that they continue. And if we can't keep that momentum going, we could quickly go back on, or we should say back off the tracks. Right now we're on the right tracks, and we need to keep it going that way.
Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah, we see some very positive things that the governor is doing. He's put his money where his mouth is as far as investing in upstate New York, and specifically the agricultural industry. His yogurt summit, for example, this summer, it was something that is very, very positive for the agricultural industry and for upstate New York's economy. And we saw something that we haven't seen in a long time as part of that summit, where he announced that he's rolling back some regulations on dairy farms to help them have the capacity to make more milk so they can go to the Greek yogurt plants. That's something that is unheard of in our sector of the industry in New York, a governor rolling back a regulation on a business to make things easier for a business. And it's not going to harm the environment or anything like that. It's just a common sense decision. He's now announced a wine and beer summit, which personally is fantastic for me.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too. But again, he and I don't mean this to be a big Andrew Cuomo parade here, but
You guys are doing a good job.
yeah, thanks. Well, I'm trying to offset you. So he's seeing some resources that he can utilize in order to grow the economy, and then actually taking action in doing it. I understand what he's doing on the hydrofracking issue. I hope the science can go, can speed up in a way that if they find that they can do it safely, that we can move forward in that, because that could be a big boon for the New York State, but that's to be determined. But he's made some good decisions, and I do see the legislature taking that lead and making the decisions, because frankly, I don't think they have much choice in some instances. They're gonna go into that room and they're not gonna come out until they have a deal, which I find that's moving in the right direction.
Anything you would add, Mr. Durand?
Now look, to be fair, I've been both praising and critical of the governor in the last 2 years. When the governor was pushing for Tier 6 and when he was pushing for the tax cap, I think as we both, all three of us have tried to illustrate, if our organizations were engaged, we ran with him and we tried and were successful in getting those two things in place. He's been more fiscally responsible in the last 2 years than New York from a state fiscal plan has been in probably the last 8. The governor has made a point to bring up certain issues that had been dormant that they're now being talked about. So now here's where I get in trouble. That I view that if the governor, the analogy, it did come to me after you left, and this has gotten me in some trouble, but if New York was a dilapidated building economically, when Governor Cuomo took office, we put a brand new red front door on it. So in 2 years, we put a brand new front door. We still need the windows, we need the roof, we need the walls. All the things that the governor has done, from the tax cap, needs mandate relief. It's a two-part scenario. So we've done one, but we haven't done the other. Article 10, to cite power plants. We haven't cited a power plant yet. And I understand it takes a long time, but there's a lot of regulatory hoops that they're going to have to go through to build that power plant. We're still talking about minimum wage. We're talking about toll hikes. We're talking about the expansion of prevailing wage. But we also are talking about scaffold, or we are talking about WICs, and we are talking about a lot of these things that we haven't. But we had 60 mandates that were introduced by the legislature on health care in the last 2 years. None of them passed, but the same bills are being introduced year after year after year. So, that's pretty good. There are positive things. There is some dialogue, but I think it is very presumptuous to say New York is open for business. I applaud the governor that he has been committed to try. I applaud the lawmakers, not collectively, but individually, many of them, no, I'm not doing that, and many on both sides of the aisle, that have pushed and spoke and acted upon many of these issues in Albany and in their district, but we have a long way to go. And that commitment and the things that I'm saying, the things that Brian and Jeff and our organizations and all of you, that's why keep the pressure on, because we have a lot of work to do.
So we're more open for business than we were several years ago, maybe, but more work to be done. The red door is more open.
No, it's red.
That's red. Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. So I'm going to ask you now, please, to take 1 minute, and this is your final summation argument here. And I think Mike actually almost just did that with his. But leave us with what voters should know going into Election Day. What message do you want to leave with them?
To vote. Too often, and Brian's alluded to this, and I've alluded to this, when I meet with members or if I talk to people who are interested in being members and you go out and you travel to business owners or you have something like this, everybody's all fired up. Man, we're making headway, we're doing great things. I'm going to get more involved. You need me to write you a letter or write a letter to the editor, or you need me to come to Albany to do a meeting, I'm going to do it. And then you went home and then you had dinner and then you forgot all about it. Be involved, be engaged. If you can, none of us pimp any organization, join them all. Join them, be involved in his, join his. If you're a farmer, be involved, but don't just join to join. Join that you are going to help. Help in the district, help in Albany, help with media. You don't understand how many times somebody in the press will call and say, do you have a business owner that owns this in this town that I can talk to? Because they can hear me say it all day long. And yeah, I can have an impact, but you, the constituent, the business owner, has a bigger impact. And there is a role for you, and it's necessary. So that's my vote and be engaged, join organizations, and do your part too.
Right.
So first, Chris, thank you for moderating. This is an easy thing to do with you doing the moderating, so thank you. To the 19 area chambers of commerce, thank you for putting this together. It's an opportunity for us to be out there and talk to people and educate them about what's going on, so we appreciate that. Here's my message. Republican, Democrat, Conservative, Independents, Green Party, the rent is too damn high party. I don't care where you are and what you're affiliated with, right? We have, and Mike hit it, we have an obligation to be good stewards of the state of New York. Don't walk away from that responsibility. If we want a New York state that we can be proud of, and we're on that path, but if we want a New York state that we can be proud of, you have to be there with us. All right, there's a lot of things that have to go on. Mike's website, mine, Jeff's, we all have e-advocacy, the RBA, Greece Chamber, Canada. Everybody's got e-advocacy. Write your letters. Talk to your elected officials. All right? It's literally put your money where your mouth is and never once walk away saying, ugh, it's just New York, that's what they do. It's what got us here. We'll turn this around. And it's a bad analogy, but New York is the Titanic. All right, and we're skirting the first iceberg.
It didn't turn around the Titanic, though.
It also hit the first iceberg. I just said we missed the first iceberg. But listen, we have that opportunity. We need all of you to join us in that. So take away, get educated, understand what's going on with your elected officials, vote according to what you believe New York should or shouldn't be doing, and encourage all your friends and family to do the same.
Yeah, I can't say much more than that. We have 30,000 members across the state, and I would guess that voting day, election day, 90% of them will vote. It's just a no-brainer. It's what you do if you want to put the right people in office. But that's just the starting day. That's like the starting line. Then it's the communication with your elected officials. You know, I think Farm Bureau's members are probably one of the more active membership organizations in the state. They think nothing of leaving the business for a day to come to Albany a couple times a year, let alone fly to Washington, D.C. once or twice a year to talk. That they know their legislators by their first name, and that's really the goal, I think, for any of us. So when you see your congressperson or your senator or the governor even, they say, "Hey, Bob, how are you doing?" And that is how you know that you're making an impact. They'll call you when they have a tough decision to make, or they need an idea for a bill, or how to fix something. That's the goal we all have, but election day is just a start. It's the hard work begins after that.
Well, please join me in thanking our panelists for doing such a great job tonight.